Hey, I'm Joseph Sissac. Welcome to Open Heaven Daily. This month, July 2025, is all about wisdom. Get wisdom before it's too late, meaning tomorrow's not promised to any of us. If we have the opportunity to get a hold of the wisdom of God today, we should do everything we can to do so that we can apply it to our lives and walk in the wisdom of God. The outcome of walking in wisdom, specifically the wisdom of God, is always greater than attempting to live our lives in the wisdom of the world. God's ways are better. Today, I want to look at something in Genesis, the latter part of Genesis in chapter 41. This is where Joseph is a Hebrew boy. He is in Egypt. He's been betrayed by his brothers and basically sold into slavery. But Joseph seems to thrive in Egypt, even in some very difficult situations. And ultimately, the reason Joseph is able to do this is because of the presence of God is with him. God protects him, provides for him through all this difficulty, and gives him incredible wisdom. So Joseph starts executing decisions that have incredible outcomes. And this, again, is a great picture of what the wisdom of God really looks like. In Genesis chapter 41 and verse 8, it says, "Now in the morning his spirit was troubled, so he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt." This is speaking of Pharaoh and its wise men. So remember, there's a wisdom of the world and there's a wisdom of God. We might also say there's a wisdom of the enemy. And the wisdom of the world, wisdom of the enemy are often one and the same, okay? It says, "And Pharaoh told them his dreams, but there was no one who could interpret them to Pharaoh." So Pharaoh has a dream in which it's troubling him because it's pretty elaborate. It's a dream, a vision, and he wants to understand what this dream means. And so one of the people who were in the jail with Joseph, Joseph had interpreted a dream for them. And so word gets to Pharaoh. Joseph is then brought to Pharaoh and so it says in verse 41 and verse 33, it says, "Now let Pharaoh look for a man discerning and wise and set him over the land of Egypt." So discerning and wise, these words are coming from Joseph now after he has interpreted the dream of Pharaoh, tells Pharaoh there's going to be 7 years of plenty, 7 years of famine, and that he needs to prepare for what's going to happen. And so he understood the dream in such a powerful sense that it was astounding to Pharaoh that Joseph had such insight into this dream that he had. And so he says, you need someone who's wise. Again, wisdom is not just knowledge, but it's being able to execute the correct decisions with that knowledge that's being applied to have a favorable outcome. Watch what Pharaoh says to Joseph. He says, "So Pharaoh said to Joseph, 'Since God has informed you of all this." Now, Pharaoh is saying this, who worships a lot of the pagan gods and the half man body and animal head gods that are painted on the walls and depicted in the hieroglyphics of Egypt. That's who Pharaoh worships, other than people looking at him as a god himself. But what's just took place is so astounding. Pharaoh has to acknowledge that there's a God and you know this God, and this God has informed to you all of these details of my dream. There is no one so discerning and wise as you are. Why does Pharaoh believe that there's no one as discerning and wise as Joseph? Because Joseph didn't just come and talk about the theory of how to interpret dreams. Joseph had the knowledge specifically of Pharaoh's dream, and he acted on it by giving not only an interpretation. See, you could tell somebody that you had a dream, and they can basically use theory and try to come up with ideas to try to give you some sense of peace and understanding about your dream. That's not the case here with Joseph. Joseph is getting discernment from God. In essence, it was God who gave Pharaoh the dream, and it's God who's giving Joseph the interpretation. It is the wisdom of God working through Joseph to not only know the dream, but to have the confidence, the wherewithal, the skill to communicate it before Pharaoh, who's probably the most powerful man on the planet at this time, okay, in terms of politically and his army and his nation and all of that. And so, what we see Pharaoh do, which is a wise move on his part, is to place Joseph in a place of authority over Egypt. In essence, Joseph becomes the second in command over all of Egypt. Joseph went from a slave in Potiphar's house to being over all of Potiphar's house, except with the exception of Potiphar and his wife, then being accused of rape by Potiphar's wife because Joseph was a good looking guy and Potiphar's wife was trying to make moves on Joseph. Joseph wouldn't have it. So he pulls away from her. She keeps his coat and then she screams bloody murder and says, "Hey, Joseph tried to rape me." This is a pretty evil woman and accuses Joseph of something he didn't do. So then Joseph gets put in jail. And while in jail, and it's just amazing to think how this comes about. But while he's a prisoner, he goes from being a slave to a prisoner. And as a prisoner, his decision making as a prisoner, the jailers start to notice something different about him. He executes things with such excellence and wisdom that they start giving him authority within the jail so that he's able to execute things. And for within a matter of time, he's like running the jail. Listen, it becomes a prisoner ran jail because of the wisdom, the great wisdom that Joseph has. I just think this is incredibly profound because he's executing with wisdom in the jail and executing this gift to interpret dreams with wisdom in the jail. He did it for both the baker and the cupbearer, who were both in jail with him. That word gets to Pharaoh. See, we've got to be good stewards over our gifts, no matter what setting we're in. Joseph could have been bitter. Joseph could have been angry while he was in the slavery of being, used as a servant in Potiphar's house, or while he's a prisoner, falsely accused. He could have been embittered and said, "I ain't interpreting dreams for nobody. These Egyptians, and been all angry and bitter toward them." But it would seem as though he kept his eyes on God. He stayed faithful to what God had called him to, even though he's in a unjust, unfair situation. And because he was faithful to use the gift of interpretation and see, you got to understand, it's wise to stay faithful to your gift no matter the circumstance that you're going through. Remain faithful. Maybe you got a boss that's not treating you fairly, a supervisor or somebody like not paying you enough, not giving you the opportunity, blaming you for things that you didn't do, all those kind of things. Guess what? Still do your job to the absolute highest level and the best possible way you're able to execute it, because you never know how that testimony of your faithfulness and the wisdom that you're executing your job at will carry you to a new position. This is exactly what happens with Joseph. And not only does it carry him to a new position, it carries him to nearly the highest position possible in all of Egypt. The continual wisdom of this is that the story of Joseph really starts with a dream, right? He's number 11 of 12 brothers. He has a dream that one day his brothers are all going to be bowing down before him. And I mean, it's like, you snotty, arrogant little kid, his older brothers are like, "How dare you think we're going to bow down to you one day?" But the reality is that did happen. They bowed down to him, believing he was an Egyptian ruler at the time, not knowing that he was their little brother. Okay. And so he was their little brother, but it was the wisdom of God, the big picture wisdom of God, that positioned Joseph in a place of authority to now provide for his family. This was during the famine. Joseph was now able to provide for his family, protect his family, provide shelter and food for his family. Thus, the family that starts off with the father and the 12 sons and now all their children, Jacob coming into Egypt, the family of Jacob, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, now becomes the nation of Israel while they're in Egypt. But if it's not for Joseph being faithful to use his gift, being faithful to operate in the wisdom of God, the promise of God to Abraham does not get fully executed if Joseph doesn't serve faithfully with the wisdom of God. Let me encourage you today. It's a wise thing to stay faithful, to be a good steward over the gift that God has given you. Yes, your circumstance might be difficult, might be unfair, you might be mistreated. Don't worry about the faithfulness or the recompense or the payback that person is going to get. That's in God's hands. God is the one that gave you the gift. Be faithful to the Lord to be a good steward over the gift that God has given you. That's how you execute wisdom when it comes to the gifts and callings that God has given you. I pray this blessed you today. I pray that you are encouraged by the word of the Lord. I want to continue to stick with me through the month of July. Like and subscribe if you have not done so. Go to our website, openheavenunited.com. Join our online community so you can be a part of the discussions that we're having, the other materials that are going to be produced on this topic of getting wisdom before it's too late. And praise God, it's not too late. You're getting wisdom right here, right now. And I pray that it blesses and encourages and causes your life to flourish like never before. Remember, God is here. He knows. He's able. I'll see you next time.